Today what I want to do is rank my top 10 Alfred Hitchcock movies. Now, there are still so many Alfred Hitchcock movies out there that I would love to see, such as Spellbound, or To Catch a Thief, or the original The Man Who Knew Too Much, or Two Strangers on a Train. Out of all the movies he's directed, I have seen 14 of them. 14 and a half, technically, because I started Saboteur the other night. I never finished it, though. But from what I gathered, I don't think it'd make my top 10 list anyways, just from what I had seen so far. But here's a list of every Alfred Hitchcock movie I have seen. And so if you don't see a certain movie make the list, either I didn't like it as much, or I haven't seen it yet. Starting off the list at number 10 goes to Shadow of a Doubt. Shadow of a Doubt is a good movie, but the thing is, I've only seen it once. It's been a few years. It's not a Hitchcock movie that I immediately go to. If I'm ever talking about Alfred Hitchcock, it's unfortunately one of the more forgotten movies. It's a good movie, but not his most memorable one. Number 9 goes to the 1956 remake, The Man Who Knew Too Much. This is my least favorite of the James Stewart and Alfred Hitchcock team-up movies. I think it is still a good movie, but there are a few things in here that just kind of bother me. Like, for one, I don't think the parents are very good parents to begin with. They're out visiting Morocco, which is a very foreign place for them, Northern Africa, and they meet this English couple, and within a day of knowing this English couple, the English couple's like, "Oh, say, can we watch your boy for a few hours?" Sure, English couple, take our son, our loved one, the only child we have. Go watch him for a few hours. Watch over him carefully, alright? The English couple kidnapped the son. There's just a few things about this movie where it has me questioning the character's actions. That's all. But I will say that the whole scene with the cymbals crashing together in the opera house is very suspenseful, and that scene right there is the one scene to take from this movie. That, as well as Doris Day singing Que Sera Sera. It's kind of like the equivalent of the song that is sung in Night of the Hunter, that Criterion movie, where when I finish watching this movie, I have that song in my head, and it doesn't really leave me for a few days. Number 8 goes to The Birds. The Birds is actually the first Alfred Hitchcock movie I've ever seen. I was probably 6 or 7 years old when I saw this movie, and it didn't necessarily scare me or anything as a child, but I remember always liking this movie. And even as a kid, I could tell that the birds were fake and that it wasn't realistic very much, but I can't help but just appreciate this movie. One, because it was my first Hitchcock film ever, but two, also just seeing how a movie about birds attacking people was considered this scary movie back in the day. Number 7 goes to Notorious. Notorious is such a great movie, and I'm sad that it's so low on the list. I wish it could be a little higher, but unfortunately, the next 6 movies I want to talk about are better than Notorious, in my opinion. The entirety of Notorious is espionage, and I love espionage in movies and in TV shows. I won't say too much about Notorious because I think that each of you should watch it for yourselves, but I will say that when you watch it, the scenes that stood out to me have to do with a wine cellar and some keys. Number 6 is another Cary Grant film, and his most popular, I would say, North by Northwest. North by Northwest was actually a movie that, the first time I saw it, I wasn't that impressed. I think I was expecting some crazy action thriller, and when I saw it, I wasn't impressed, but I watched it again recently, and man, this movie is so good. And not only is it good, but it's actually pretty funny too. Cary Grant's character is just a hoot. When he's first mistaken and they escort him out of the restaurant to take to the mansion, the guy grabs him, he puts his hand on his arm, and Cary Grant just kind of looks down, he's like, "Wait a minute, what's that supposed to be?" Like, his reaction is priceless. I love his reaction in that scene. I found myself so invested in the movie that I completely forgot about the whole scene with the crop duster chasing Cary Grant. And so when that scene came around, I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing in this movie. That scene is so iconic. I love that scene. Number 5 and number 4 are pretty much interchangeable. It's hard to choose which one I like between the two of these. They're so different from each other, but at the same time, I love both of them very much. I'm going to say number 5 goes to Dial M for Murder. This was the first movie that I watched from Alfred Hitchcock as I was getting older. I mentioned that I watched The Birds as a child, but I was probably about 14 years old when I saw Dial M for Murder. And it's really what made me interested to see more of what Alfred Hitchcock directed. I think it is such a smart movie, the way we see this main character, Ray Milland, plan his wife's murder. and then it just goes so horribly wrong. And to see him recover from the murder as well, lying on the spot. And the thing is, I can't say that Ray Milland was like necessarily a bad guy to me. I don't want to say I was rooting for him, but I was just intrigued by his character and by his actions, and I was wanting to see what would happen. The ending is very satisfying, and all around, Dial M for Murder is a classic, and I feel like it's more of an underrated Alfred Hitchcock masterpiece, so definitely check this one out. Now, number 4 goes to Rope with Jimmy Stewart. Such a fun movie, and I believe it was only filmed in 9 shots, which is very cool how back in the day Alfred Hitchcock was really moving for those long one-take shots. Something I liked about this one a lot was Jimmy Stewart's character. Normally I feel like he plays more of the animated, charismatic character, whereas this movie he was a very intelligent, to himself type guy. But at the same time, he's a bit outspoken. He says what's on his mind. If he sees something that's out of the ordinary, he'll call someone out on it. And this is a bit of a spoiler alert, but the final scene where Jimmy Stewart has accused the 2 men of murdering his friend is very powerful to me. I love how the street signs from outside are blinking on and off. So one moment it'll be red lights shining on Jimmy Stewart's face, and the next moment it'll be green lights shining on his face. It makes the scene that much more thrilling. And this movie has a great message about how we can't compare ourselves to others. We have no right to say that we're superior to another person. Jimmy Stewart gives a great monologue where he's telling them, you're not God. You can't say that you're superior, because their whole motive is killing this guy because they're superior to him. Where Jimmy Stewart gives this speech, this really powerful speech saying, you have no right to say that you're better than this guy. That whole entire speech from Jimmy Stewart is my favorite thing about this movie. Oh my goodness, guys. Top 3 movies. Top 3 Alfred Hitchcock movies. This was hard to rank. Number 3 and number 2 especially. For me, it's kind of like Home Alone 1 and Home Alone 2, where I love so many things about each movie. I always use that comparison, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Number 3, I'm going to say goes to Vertigo. The thing I love about Vertigo is just how iconic it is. There are so many iconic camera shots, and Jimmy Stewart is great as always, and the whole entire story is just very interesting. And Jimmy Stewart's nightmare sequence where his floating head is going down the grave is the most iconic shot from this movie, as well as the scene that follows where you just see Jimmy Stewart's black silhouette falling in a white blank space. That scene is amazing, and then he jolts awake from the nightmare. I love that scene so much, and the twist in this movie is great. It's just the perfect Alfred Hitchcock movie. I love it. And it gets better with each viewing. Number 2 goes to Rear Window. Now, the reason I was having such a hard time with putting Rear Window or Vertigo at number 2 was because to me, Vertigo, the whole movie, is good. Whereas Rear Window, it starts off really well, and then it kind of drags in the middle. I mean, you're watching L.B. Jeffries, this man with a broken leg, and he's in the same room the entire movie. It drags a little bit to me. But the thing is, the last 20 minutes are so suspenseful that it makes up for any moments that dragged. It makes up for any time I was bored, because when the movie ends, all I can think about are those last 20 minutes and how suspenseful they are. I don't want to talk about it too much. If you haven't seen it, then I definitely recommend it. But Rear Window has inspired many movies today, most notably Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf. It is a fun watch, it is suspenseful, and it's my favorite Jimmy Stewart Alfred Hitchcock film. And number 1, everyone, my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie of all time, if you haven't already guessed it, it is definitely Psycho. Psycho to me is just the game changer. This is the movie that Alfred Hitchcock will forever be remembered for. The music, the twist, and everything that happens in this movie are so iconic and so memorable. It's even funny how I went into the movie, the first time I ever saw this movie, I already knew the twist going into it just because of how universally well known that twist is. But yet, the whole entire movie was still very enjoyable, even with me knowing the secret the whole time. And it's because of Anthony Hopkins' performance. He is just so amazing as Norman Bates. I love watching his performance. It's honestly one of my favorite movie performances of all time. Not only is it my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie, but it's one of my favorite movies of all time. And it always has been. Ever since I first saw this movie, it has been in my top 25 movies of all time. And I don't see it going away anytime soon. Alfred Hitchcock is one of my favorite movie directors of all time, if you didn't notice from this video. He's a great movie director. He changed movie history in so many ways, and if you haven't already gone into Alfred Hitchcock, I highly recommend you give it a start. If you're wondering what movies to start off with, just watch this whole entire video. I mean, come on, he's cool enough to have a bobblehead of. It's actually freaky how much this looks like him. I would also recommend buying the Blu-ray set. I've had this for a few years, and this is how I've watched so many of the movies on this list. There's still movies in this set that I haven't seen yet. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button if you liked what you saw, and leave your comments. Again, leave your rankings or any recommendations. See you later.